All right, we are live here. We are live on TikTok and on YouTube, and we are going to talk about Bible translations today, specifically the King James translation, but take questions for other translations as well, because when you are wanting to read the Bible, it is important to have a solid translation that actually is the kinds of things. Oh, where are we? Jeez.
Is the kinds of things. Oh, where were we?
Yeah, sorry about that. We had a little bit of an echo in here. Okay, so it's important to have a Bible translation that you can trust and that works for you. And so we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about the King James translation specifically, and why it is that the King James translation is a bad translation. I would say that the King James translation is one of the worst translations easily available on the market right now. And it's a bad translation for a whole lot of different reasons. One of the main reasons that the King James translation is a bad translation is because of a thing that oftentimes will make people actually think that it's better, right? They'll say, if you think about it logically, people will say, okay, look, the King James translation is an older translation. It was made a long time ago. And so because it was made a long time ago, because it's actually closer in distance of years to when the events in the Bible supposedly happened, that makes it more accurate. That makes logical sense. However, that's just not the case, because what has happened since the King James translation was released is that there has been an enormous amount of discovery made of ancient manuscripts of the Bible. The famous ones are the Dead Sea Scrolls, of course, but there have been an enormous number of discoveries of fragments, as well as whole books of the Bible, older translations. So basically, the King James translation was based off of more recent copies of the Bible. And so basically what's happened is over those years, archaeologists have discovered older and older copies of the manuscripts. We don't have any manuscript that was like written in the hand of Paul or Moses or any of those kinds of people that you might think are the writers of a specific text. We don't have anything like that, right? But we do have older and older copies as archaeologists find them. And what that means is the closer you get to today, the more accurate a translation can be, because you can see the progression of translation across time. Here's why that's important. Basically, what you do is if you take all of the pieces, the fragments, the pieces of the Bible that we have in the original languages, and you sort of arrange them in order, right, from the earliest, and you just keep going until you've got the most recent ones. You can track back, and what you find is that there have been additions made throughout the translation history of the Bible, and so you'll go back and you'll say, okay, look, this was in it right here, and if you go back, you say, okay, it was in a couple of them here, and then anything before that, we have no evidence that it was in any translation before a certain date. And so that's how you can track the adding of material to the Bible. A perfect example of that is the end of the book of Mark. If you go to the end of the book of Mark in most translations, most modern translations, you will find some sort of notation that says this huge chunk of the end of the book of Mark actually is not in any ancient, in the oldest manuscripts, which means it's not reliable. It wasn't part of the sort of original text of the book of Mark. And that's unfortunately the one that has the bit about drinking poison and holding snakes. So the holding snakes churches are basing that practice on something that wasn't even in the Bible. And so what happens then is that there are just verses in the King James Version that shouldn't be in the Bible. And there are some places in the Bible where if you are, kind of nerding out and paying attention, you will notice actual verses missing, that there's so much consensus around it that modern translations just delete it. It'll be like verse 20, verse 21, verse 23. And you're like, where did verse 22 go? Well, that wasn't in the original manuscript. It's only been in really recent ones. So that's one of the big problems with the King James Version. But the King James Version has had problems from the very beginning. From the moment that it was released, it was very problematic, because when it was released, people were like, it's impossible to understand. Which is funny, because a lot of people think, oh, the reason the King James Version sounds like that is because that's how people spoke at the time. But that's not the case. As soon as it was released, it was the popular version of the Bible at that time was called the Bishop's Bible. And the King James Version is in some ways based on the Bishop's Bible. But when the King James came out, the King James Version, the authorized King James Version, people were like, why? This is horrible. We can't understand it. Why would you translate a Bible with this kind of wording? Because what they did in the King James Version is they put English words in the Hebrew syntax, in like the Hebrew order of the Bible. And that is like, I don't know, it's a wild thing. So like there's every language, right, has different ways that it orders the words. And those words are weird if you put them, words from another language into the order of words from a more ancient language, right? And so immediately people said, as soon as it was released, it was hard to understand. But another problem with the King James Version is that, as you can imagine, the English language has evolved an enormous amount since the King James Version was released. And that means that even though it's not a very accurate translation, even though it was hard to understand to the original the people that were reading it, a lot of the words just don't mean the same thing anymore, and can be incredibly confusing. Like the classic example of it comes from Jude verse 22. Jude only has one chapter in it, and in the King James Version, it reads, "But of some have compassion, making a difference," right? So we will read that and you'll say, oh yeah, making a difference. Like if we have compassion on someone, it can change their lives. It can make a difference. But the problem is that make a difference, that phrase, it didn't have that meaning of changing somebody's life, or changing something for the good until the 1900s, right? That's a very recent meaning for make a difference. At the time of the King James, that phrase make a difference meant that you should have compassion. It was about discernment, right? It was about kind of understanding, making a difference between one thing and the other. And so if you understand that, then reading the King James sort of plainly and figuring out that make a difference doesn't mean like making a positive impact. It actually just that sort of plain reading of it would be more like but of some have compassion, but be discerning on whom you have compassion, right? That's how the people who were originally reading the King James Version would have understood Jude verse 22. But that's actually still not great, because that's a bad translation. It was, like we said, the King James Version is is based on outdated manuscripts. It's based on manuscripts from the Bible that are more recent than the ones we have today. And the way the Greek word is actually rendered in like reliable translations, it changes the aspect of the word compassion as well. And ultimately, what a more accurate translation of Jude 22 is like, those are be compassionate on people who are doubting, on those who are trying to figure out what they believe about God. That is completely different. And the King James Version is sort of rife. It's riddled with these kinds of problems. Charity is a perfect example. Charity right now means something that, the giving things to a nonprofit. Charity at that time would mean something more like love. On and on and on. And so that's a basic understanding of why the King James Version is an awful translation. Now, if you are looking for a good translation, the one that the academic community says is the best one is something called the New Revised Standard Updated Edition. And this is a study Bible. So SBL is the Society for Biblical Literature. The Society for Biblical Literature is the sort of collection of people with PhDs in the Bible and biblical languages and things like that. And so that group, the academic experts have a study Bible that sort of notates all kinds of interesting things. And it's in the New Revised Standard Updated Edition, the NRSVUE. So if you're going online, trying to read the most accurate translation, you're going to look for the NRSVUE, the New Revised Standard Updated Edition. Let's see. We've got. So that's the King James Version. The ancient manuscripts, we have way older manuscripts now available than were available to the King James people, the people who are translating the King James, which means that newer translations are inherently more accurate because you can see a progression of translations. If you arrange the manuscripts that we have and the fragments in order from oldest to newest, you see additions. Like there's one addition that's really interesting. You'll see it, a verse doesn't appear in any of these older translations, and then there's a notation in the margins of a bunch of translations about a verse, and then later that notation actually makes it into the text itself. And so the King James Version would only have had this part that has this added piece because archaeologists just hadn't discovered as many ancient manuscripts as we had today. So, I'm going to also answer your questions. So if you have questions, I'd love to answer some of those. It can be questions about Bible translations. It can also be questions about anything, religion, faith, all that kind of stuff. We're gonna do as many of those as you can. So I see. I'm sorry, Big A. It sounds like you're going through a hard time. Let's see, Laura. How do I feel about non-denominational churches? I personally am not, I don't sort of go to them. I did when I was an evangelical youth. But the part of the reason is that a lot of non-denominational churches, there's no real accountability structure for what they're believing and teaching and all that kind of stuff. And so it's just the whim of the pastor. And I think that's incredibly unhealthy and ripe for abuse and manipulation at a whole other level. Not all of them are like that, so I'm not. I don't want to disparage all of them as a group, but and also most non-denominational churches that I am aware of are also very conservative evangelical churches, which is not my thing, as you can see from my content, right? Where I believe that the Bible is pro-choice and doesn't condemn homosexuality, all of that kind of stuff. Sean Kenta, do you think the KJV still has a literary value, even if it's objectively bad as a translation? That's a really great question. Literary value is interesting because some people want to say that it's an example of English that happened the way English was spoke at that time, but it actually wasn't. When it first came out, the King James, the main criticism was people couldn't understand it. Like the way it was written, the actual order of the words and the way the words were rendered were confusing to people because people didn't talk like that. And what's interesting is that it didn't catch on until the King James, the popular Bible translation at that time was called the Bishop Bible. King James said, we're not going to sell that anymore. And then all of a sudden the King James Bible was really the only one available. And so it became much more popular. Then when other translations started to come out, it really lost popularity until the resurgence of evangelical revivals and all this kind of stuff. They liked the old language. Also, when it's hard to understand, it's easy to manipulate people and tell them, oh, this is what this actually means, when it doesn't. So it has literary value in the sense that a lot of people over the years have quoted things in the King James version, but I don't know that it has some historical value in that sense, but it doesn't have linguistic value, right? It's just it's a really problematic translation on so many different levels. Imperator, I can't see the rest of your name here. How deep of a skeptic are you if you're still a pastor? That's a fair question. I will tell you that I am a pastor who's not sure if God exists. I have deep doubts and questions. And so I am a person that sort of relies on data. And I would say that I'm a practitioner of Christianity. That's the thing that I grew up with. That's the thing that I know and I'm trained in. There's also been a lot of research done on spiritual beliefs and practices. There's a great book. I don't have it here, but it's called The Awakened Brain by Lisa Miller. That she's a PhD person, peer-reviewed research all around spiritual practice, spiritual beliefs and relationships with the divine, the universe, whatever. And she was not researching specific streams, but any stream. And the research is really clear that there is a lot of positive effect on people who find spiritual beliefs that work for them, that don't harm them. And that's the problem, is that religion has been used to harm people so often that it can be problematic. But that's really what I do. I help people find spiritual beliefs that work for them. And that is spiritual beliefs that help you be the best version of yourself and help you find a purpose greater than yourself. And we actually have a Discord group that's all about that, and it's really great. If you're interested, we call it not church because somebody said it's like church. That there's these people that are trying to talk about spirituality, but it's like all the things you want people there for each other, except that nobody's telling you you're going to hell because you don't believe the right thing. If you'd be interested in that kind of community, you should check it out. You can go to patreon.com/skepticpastor. It's $3 a month. We charge for it because we're not going to ask people to donate 10% of their income. And I feel like you pay for what you get. If it works for you, great. If it doesn't, then, stop paying for it. Laura, what other books do I recommend? Oh man, that's a problem because I am a bibliophile. If you want to ask book topics, and what I recommend, please put that a little bit further down in the chat. When I get to that question, I will definitely answer that. Can you give us a specific verse as an example from both translations? Sure, let's do that. That verse, one of the most problematic, a classic example of one of the problematic verses in And the King James Version is Jude verse 22. And so Jude verse 22, let me pull it up in two translations. And first off, the King James Version, and then we will do the New Revised Standard Updated Edition. So let me pull this in the King ABCDF. GHIJK, King James Version. King James Version says, and of some have compassion, making a difference. And the New Revised Standard Updated Edition, which is the version that academics say is the most accurate, it's based on the most, all of the texts that we have, the most ancient manuscripts. So Jude 22, again, King James Version, and of some have compassion, making a difference. New Revised Standard Updated Edition, and have mercy on some who are wavering. Totally different. And it's because of all the things, right? All the things that are afforded by more ancient manuscripts, better understanding of the language, actually putting it into modern English, using modern English definitions, word definitions. So, yeah. Can you explain the Trinity, please? I cannot get my mind around it, and it sounds like polytheism to me. You're not wrong. It very much sounds like polytheism. And let's just be clear, the Trinity is not something that the writers of the Bible really understood. The understanding of the Trinity is something that develops later. It's developed several hundred years later, as people are trying to grapple with who God is, who Jesus is. But I would say the way that I try to understand the Trinity, because I don't want to take the mystery of it. And the basic idea is that the Trinity, the God, the Creator, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit are three unique beings that are also one being, right? And so the way I like to figure it is not to really separate them out, but to keep the mystery there. And it's like, I like to say that they are in such a close relationship as to cease to be distinct, even though they are distinct. And I liken that to relationships. We sort of can catch a glimpse of it in relationships in our lives where we get really close and enmeshed, and you can sometimes feel in some deep friendships or romantic relationships like, oh wow, we are like one in some ways. So that's the best I've got for that. Rob, lost me at data. God is spirit. Sure, that's fine. God is spirit, but when you want to talk about accuracy of translations, you're going to need some data. If you want to talk about beliefs and that kind of stuff, for me, I'm not going to just believe something because a pastor says it. I want to believe something because there's some data behind it. But I get it. That's not everybody. I'm a deep skeptic and also a pastor. Ennio, I have doubts, but then I have moments when I feel, I'm guessing like you feel like you believe. Yep, that's me. I have the same thing. And I think that that's natural. That's the natural way that humans experience faith and religion. You have doubts, and you also have moments where you feel like you really believe. And that's what it means to be human. And if you don't have doubts, then you probably aren't really seriously considering your faith. I find that doubts are generally a sign of spiritual health, not a sign of a spiritual problem. Abigail Autor, it's quite ironic that you call yourself a pastor but a deep skeptic. You need to have faith. Thanks, I appreciate that. I don't argue with people about that. If you think that I'm going to hell or that having doubts is a problem, that's fine. Also, look at John, the book of John, and the story of Thomas. You'll find me there in that story. Where is there a verb and subject but no object? I'm not sure what you've got there, Pipoka. If you could ask that with more words, that might be great. What's Sutoi, Marion? I'm not sure what you're saying there. Blue Fox, he is deceiving people. Why is anyone listening to him? They're listening to me because a lot of people are like me. Blue Fox. A lot of people have doubts and questions, and they don't just want to hear a pastor tell them what to believe. They don't want to inherit beliefs. They want to choose informed beliefs based on academic consensus, based on data, based on experience. In my tradition, we say that you choose your beliefs based on scripture, tradition, experience, and reason. We can go into that later, but like, it's not just one thing. It's not just one person's idea, and it's not just the Bible, because you can't just believe the Bible, because you've got to translate it, you've got to understand it. It was written to ancient people and ancient cultures. That's, I think, why people listen to me. At least that's what they say. We will stay. Can you talk about the verses that affect women and how many are correctly translated? Okay, yeah, I will talk a little bit about the sort of okay, so let's just be clear. One, before we even talk about verses regarding women in the Bible, we need to understand that the Bible was written at a specific place, at a specific time, to a specific culture. And there are cultural values that are expressed in the Bible that nobody questioned, nobody thought about, nobody was like processing at that level. They're talking to people who understand it. A lot, like the New Testament, most of the like the writings of Paul, for example, where a lot of these really problematic verses come in the New Testament, he was, for most of what he was writing, he had no idea that it was going to last and be used as sort of authoritative texts. So I think there's that. And so when you are trying to read the Bible and understand it, you've got to understand what it meant in the original culture. Then you've got to abstract the biblical culture away and say, okay, these were the concepts, and now let's put those concepts into modern culture, into our modern day, and see what they have to say. One of the verses that is constantly talked about, and I talk about it in my book that's coming out later called How to Not Suck as a Christian, is the thing that says women shouldn't talk in church. That verse is first off, in other places that's attributed to Paul. In other places, Paul talks about women who are church leaders. Uses there's a woman named Junia where he talks about her as an actual minister, and so what does that mean for that? Well, there's a specific cultural thing happening in that church, some specific problems. Some specific problems that were happening there, and so he's addressing something in a specific church, and what that specific church was having is that the women didn't understand things, didn't have the level of education needed, and they needed to and they were like interrupting. They had this newfound freedom. The reason they had that newfound freedom was because the Christians were very much pushing back against patriarchy, against racism. You'll see Paul say there is no slave, Greek, male, female, no Jew or Gentile, but all people are accepted by God. And so so there's that. So what's interesting, though, is when you look at a text like the Bible that was written in a very misogynistic, very patriarchal culture, you're expecting to see misogyny. You're expecting to see patriarchy. And if that's all you see, that's all you see. But you actually ultimately see in the Bible pushing back against that. You see examples of women in power, of women like being judges. Deborah is a judge, like the highest level of person in the book of Judges, right? You see that over and over again, the valuing of women in a different way, in a bigger way than was normed in that culture, which means that as misogynist, as horrible as the Bible can be with women, ultimately, in the ancient world, it was pushing people to be less misogynistic, less patriarchal, which is really interesting to me. All right, thank you for your explanation. You are welcome. What do you think about the Anukai and the government trials? I am not super well versed on the Anukai. So, and UFOs, I don't have anything authoritative, any training in that area. What can we say to people who swear by the King James Version only, going as far as to calling other translations misleading? I think what you do is you give them data, right? You say, look, you can look back on the reference that I have to Jude 22. I've done videos on the King James translation. You can sort of take some notes there. And I say, like, look, you think that other translations are misleading, but the King James Version just was based on outdated texts, right? Outdated ancient texts. We have much better, more accurate versions of the Hebrew and the Greek Bible, right? And so it's just outdated. The words in it don't mean the same thing as they mean today. And nobody ever talked that way when it first came out. People thought that it was hard to understand. So I think you share that. And, if they don't want to believe academics, if they don't want to believe science, there's not a lot you can do. But I like to arm people with knowledge, to give them data so that they can make their own decisions, and then let them make their own decisions. WK, do you feel salvation is personal only? No, not even close. I think that's a just super narrow way of thinking about that concept and that world. Like, so if you look at the Bible, like in the book of Genesis, we see the breaking of sort of everything. And the relationship between God and humanity, the relationship between humans, Adam and Eve, the relationship between the humans and the earth, like the cosmos is affected. And what I see when I read the rest of it is that the cosmos is like the whole thing has to be redeemed. And I think there's a very big picture being painted by the Bible that is way bigger than you and me having something fixed with God, way bigger than you and me like going to heaven or whatever, right? So yeah, no, I don't think that at all. Crangus McBride, why is the King James Version bad? Okay, so let's just say, I see Blue Fox says, King James does not have passages taken out of it like the ones on how to remove demons. Okay, so Blue Fox, this is great, and Crangus, let's talk about it. We're in a new, not all of you were here at the beginning. So the King James Version is probably the least accurate translation that is easily available on the market right now for a couple of reasons. One of the primary reasons is that the King James Version is based on outdated manuscripts, outdated Hebrew and Greek versions of the Bible. When the King James Version was being translated, or I should say, since the King James Version has been translated, those versions, archaeologists had discovered earlier and earlier, like older and older versions of the text. And those older and older versions of the text reveal significant changes over time. And so, like when you arrange them in order from the oldest to the newest, right? From the oldest to the newest translation, what you can do is you can look at the new. Let's see. We're going to go oldest right to newest. You can go to the newest translation, read it in the ancient Hebrew and Greek, and then you can go back and you can say, oh, look, right here, this is a little different in some of the translations. And then you go back and you say, oh, look, now here, well, actually from this point further back, the oldest translations are all the same, but they don't include this passage that is common in these newer versions. There's a lot of passages like that. One of the the easiest one to find is the very end of the book of Mark. There's a huge section that any modern translations will notate that say, this is not in the most ancient translations that we have, and it'll be asterisk, it'll be grayed out, it'll be bracketed, but it will be noted that the stuff about drinking poison, the stuff about holding snakes, that is not original. And so the King James, it's just riddled with that kind of error. Not only that, like you look at Jude 22, for example, classic example. The words in the King James Version just don't mean the same thing in English today as they did when it was translated, which means it's it's hard to understand. Jude only has one chapter, so this is verse 22. But of some, this is the King James Version, of some have compassion, making a difference. This idea, and when you read that, you say like, oh, have compassion on people, and that'll make a difference in their lives. But the problem is that phrase making a difference or make a difference, that meaning of it was not it didn't mean that until the 1900s. When the King James Version was translated, make a difference meant like distinguish between two things. And so if you read it with that understanding and say, oh, wait, you need to have compassion on people, but be discerning whom you have compassion on, right? Who you're having compassion, like you got to pay attention to that. But it's still bad because we have something that is an error in the text that the King James was translated, a syntax error that all the ancient translations that changes the meaning of the verse altogether. Ultimately, it means that to have compassion on people who are making a distinction, the best rendering of that would be have compassion on people who are doubting. And so when you find a recent translation, like the New Revised Standard Updated Edition, which is what academics say is the most accurate, it will translate it like that, like something about people who are doubting. So, for example, the New Revised Standard Updated Edition translates Jude 22 as, and have mercy on some who are wavering, right? Some who are wavering, that's how it does. So that's why the King James Version is just not accurate. It's not reliable. We shouldn't be using it. And when it came out, people said it was hard to understand because of the way it went about translating words into English that used the Hebrew syntax and the Greek syntax, which was very confusing. So I hope that helps. That's reassuring. I'm just coming out of a season of deep, deep doubt. Jessica F. Mo, I get that. I get that so deeply. And I would just say that though there are seasons of deeper doubt, doubts are a sign of spiritual health. They're a sign that you are engaging deeply in your faith, and that's a good thing. Asking questions is a really, really good thing. WK, thank you for that wonderful emoji. I really appreciate that. Amy Lusk, what keeps you so close to Christianity at this point? Amy, that's a real good question. I'm not sure how close I am to Christianity. I don't like the term Christian just because it's come to be associated with all kinds of horrible things. I say I'm a practitioner of Christianity. I am that because that's the tradition I grew up in, and that's the thing I know the most about. And I've found life in that tradition. I've also been wounded and traumatized deeply by that tradition. So I don't tell everybody that's the thing that they need to do. But as I've processed my own faith journey, I've found a lot of life, and partially because I understand the Bible better, and I understand that the Bible is pro-choice. I understand that the Bible is not anti-homosexual, all of that stuff. What are your thoughts on a divine feminine God / counterpart to God? There's actually there's archaeological evidence of that in Semitic sites. So there's, and you hear it referenced in the Bible, the Asherah poles that people keep saying like, oh, hey, don't worship Asherah. But one of the ways you can tell that a site is Jewish, archaeologists is that they always find little statue of a female deity called Asherah, and it seems like the earliest versions of the way people practiced Judaism was with a divine feminine counterpart. So it's just interesting. It's something to think about. Blue Fox, don't claim you're a Christian. Sure, I'm a practitioner of Christianity. And part of the reason I don't like to accept the label Christian is because there are people who do hateful things and manipulate people, tell people that they're going to hell because they're queer or whatever, and they call themselves Christian. I'm not like that. I don't want to be looped in with those people. So yeah, I'm a practitioner of Christianity. I think that's best thing I can come up with. I'm so confused about God's role in our lives and prayer. Me too, Jessica F. Mo. But when you look at all traditions, like all traditions have meditation, prayer, those kinds of practices. And so I think it's important to keep that. And you've got a lot of questions, and I think this is a point to say, like, that's normal, but doing that in community is important, and a community of people that aren't going to tell you tell you you're going to hell because you do the wrong thing. We've got a community like that. It's called Not Church. It's a community of people who identify as all kinds of different places religiously, but we have this Discord server, and it's beautiful. We process our religious faith. We process the Bible, the trauma. We hold space for each other. We post memes. It's really fun, and we call it Not Church because one of the people early on said it's like church, but because it's all the things I want from church: community, people who are there for each other, talking about spiritual things, but nobody's telling you you're going to hell because you don't believe the right thing. If you're interested in that, you should check it out. You can go to patreon.com/skepticpastor. Patreon.com/skepticpastor. $3 a month gets you into the Discord. We charge for it because we're not going to ask you to give us 10% of your money because the Bible actually doesn't say tithing is a thing. That's another whole discussion. It's also a chapter in my book that's coming out called How to Not Suck as a Christian. So you should go to patreon.com/skepticpastor. We'd love to have you in there. Pipoka, Numbers chapter 16, verse 1, and took Korach, son of Itzar, son of, without ever saying what he took. Let's just look at that in a good translation. Numbers 16, and, I did not do that right. Numbers 16. We're going to go down and just look at this together. And the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, separate yourselves from this congregation. So, 16:1, sorry. Now Korach, son of Ishar, son of Koach, blah, 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 along with these people and son of blah, 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 took 250 Israelite men, right? So here's what I think is going on there for you. You are reading each verse as if it's its own thing. The verse numbers have been added to the text way later. And it's funny the way the verse numbers fall. Like, it makes no sense sometimes. Like, the first story of creation is in the first chapter and ends in chapter 2, verse 4 of Genesis. Actually, even part of verse 4, it makes no sense. And so what you're seeing there is verse 1 and 2 are actually part of one sentence, right? So the object of the verb is there, but it's in the next verse over. You have some feedback on my mic. I'm not sure. I hope that is, how can I locate your Patreon? Go to patreon.com/skepticpastor. Patreon.com/skepticpastor. So what's the best Bible to use? I am glad you asked that, Valkyrie 2286. This is it. The New Revised Standard Updated Edition. So this is what it says. You see SBL there? The SBL is the Society for Biblical Literature. That is the academic society where all the people with the PhDs in Bible and in biblical languages, they're all a member of the Society for Biblical Literature. And the academic consensus, what the SBL says is that the most accurate translation of the Bible is the New Revised Standard Updated Edition. The New Revised Standard Updated Edition is the most accurate translation of the Bible, and this one is the SBL Study Bible. So that group of academics has actually created a study Bible. A study Bible, you'll see like there's that's not a biblical passage. You'll see it has the biblical text up top, and the bottom has like information about different verses, and there's even insets here like this one about an archaeological discovery. But this is the Bible. The New Revised, this translation that you're looking for online, if you're using something like Bible Gateway, is New Revised Standard Updated Edition, and if you're looking for a Bible, that's a really good one, the SBL Study Bible. what translation do I recommend? I recommend that one for study. But if you want something that's recent, that's based on all of those really great, all of the most ancient texts, but is a little bit more readable, because sometimes the accuracy of the NRSVUE can be a little hard to read. A little bit more readable is CEB, the Common English Bible. I think that's great. So do you use the King James Version of the Bible for any teachings? Never. The King James Version is an inaccurate translation of the Bible, so I would never use it, ever. I have a copy for reference, and I can look at it online, but no. And also, the King James Version was not translated into the language of that day, which is interesting. When it came out, the primary complaint that people had of the King James Version when it came out was that it was not understandable. Like, it was hard to understand because they didn't translate it into the common language. Hey, thanks for that, Rose. They didn't translate it into the common language. They used the syntax of the Hebrew and the Greek and just plugged the words in, and it was very hard to understand. It didn't actually become popular. The most popular translation of the Bible at that time was called the Bishop's Bible. King James didn't become popular until King James said, we're not going to allow the sale of the Bishop's Bible anymore. So yeah, WK, thank you so very, very much for that. I appreciate you. Thank you. I appreciate you too, WK. I appreciate that. Do you date as a pastor? I think that pastors are fine to date. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with pastors dating, having relationships, all that kind of stuff. Because that's a Catholic thing, that I'm not a Catholic, so that's great. Which one is best? I think I just answered that. New Revised Standard Updated Edition. You have a one-sided relationship with an imaginary water-wailing friend. Go Gotti. Yeah, sure. You have a nice one-sided relationship. I hear you. You're pasting that multiple times. Does your church do a live stream? Well, here's something interesting. I am in January, 1st of January, I'm going to be full-time doing just this, being a pastor to all of you, being a pastor to people who can't go to church, won't go to church, have been wounded, traumatized by the church. Those are my people, the doubters, the questioners. I get DMs from people every day that say, hey, I need a pastor. I'm not ever going to church, but you're it. And that's why we have the Not Church Discord. That's basically a church. It's all the things that you want from a church, spiritual community, people of all different kinds of religious placements that are trying to find spiritual beliefs that work for them, and are there for each other. But the beautiful thing is there's nobody in there telling you you're going to hell because you believe the wrong thing. And if you want to be part of that, you can go to patreon.com/skepticpastor. It's $3 a month, because you get what you pay for. If it doesn't work for you, it's not great, stop paying. But it's a wonderful place. King James Version is verb-based intuition. One has to be able to see. That's actually not accurate definition. The new versions are noun-based, counterintuitive. Nope. Sorry, I hear you, but that's not what's going on. And the reason the King James Version is inaccurate has nothing to do with the style of translation. Has everything to do with it was based on inaccurate manuscripts. They were the best they had at the time, but we know we have so many more older manuscripts that it's just inaccurate. What do you think afterlife is like? Man, Julie June, that's a great question. I have no idea. If you look at the Bible, I had a rabbi say this to me one time when I asked, what do Jewish people believe about heaven or hell? And he said, we believe that if God wanted us to spend more time, spend a lot of time thinking about it, that God would have said more about it. I think that's right. There's very little actual reliable stuff about heaven and hell in the Bible. Most of those concepts are way after the Bible was created. I have no idea. I hope that the afterlife is full of my ancestors and is way better than this life. Yeah. All right, we're going to scroll down. I've gotten really behind. KJV is the best translation. Wow, Meg, that's just wrong. It's not the best translation because it's based on outdated manuscripts. We have so many more ancient manuscripts that there's whole sections of the King James Version that aren't in the most ancient manuscripts. The easiest to find is the end of the book of Mark. Look there, you'll find in any modern translation, it's bracketed, it's asterisk, there's like notes that says, hey, this stuff about holding snakes and drinking poison, it's not in there. It's not. And yeah, I'm progressive. Hallelujah. The Bible is pro-choice. It is not anti-homosexual. I am very much so. I think it's most likely, if there is a God, it's not a God that any sacred book has ever chronicled. Spencer, I think that's an interesting perspective. And it's an idea that idea is actually undergirds interfaith work, which is the idea that like there is this God being, whatever, and all of these faiths are trying to describe their experience with it. And so it sort of stands apart. I know a lot of people who find a lot of life in that belief. I get that, Spencer. TIA, I feel that I resonate with that. I use the version as a tool. I'm not sure what you were referring to. What's the King James Version based on versus the older, more accurate manuscript? So the King James so just basically at the time the King James Version was being translated, it had a set of manuscripts, ancient manuscripts in Hebrew and Greek. Since that time, over the past several hundred years, archaeologists have continued to discover more and more manuscripts. Some of them are newer and a lot of them are a lot older. And so that's what I was talking about. There's just a lot of fragments, a lot of whole codices. We don't have anything that was like written by Moses or anything like that. Nothing even close to that. Everything is a lot newer than that. King James Bible is God Bible. You need to get off here. There is a heaven and a hell. Sorry, user. Obviously, we don't agree on that. And basically, what I'm trying to tell you is that all of the academic community that is behind this. This is not new data. You go to any reputable seminary with reputable academics. They're going to tell you the same thing. The Society for Biblical Literature, which is the sort of academic organization where all the PhDs with training in biblical languages and all of that, they all agree. It's just not. I'm sorry. And I know that it can be hard. If you grew up with the King James translation, if you were in churches that use it and pastors are telling you that it's accurate, the problem is those pastors have not been trained the same way that people with PhDs in ancient Hebrew or Koine Greek or all of the kind of academics that understand this stuff more deeply than those pastors. And so you can't trust those pastors above the academic community. And it's hard. I know it's hard, but you just got to get the data, got to listen and learn and engage honestly with it. Do you believe Jesus actually died on a cross or not? That's a really interesting question, Malachi XXL. There was a moment in the late 1900s, right, like 1990s, where there was a lot of like question about the historical Jesus. People have pretty much let go of that, and there is consensus. Is growing consensus that you've got references by Josephus and some other people, and the idea is that just the statement that like the early movement of Christianity was exploding and they were making these claims, and if those claims weren't accurate, people wouldn't have. They could check the claims, right? There were people around that would have said, no, we know this guy, like. So yeah, I think, that's probably what happened. That's the most likely answer there. I want a Bible from before 1946. Yes, 1946, the translation that ruined everything, that moment. You will find in this, that's the moment that the word homosexuality was added to the Bible. And yeah, you can find that The problem is, so let's just look real quick. So you don't need a Bible before 1946. You just need a more accurate translation. So I'm just trying to get these. I want to make sure I get these references right. So Leviticus 18:22. And Leviticus 20. Let me find 20. You'll find in more accurate translations, you'll find that it doesn't use the word homosexuality. And in Corinthians and in Romans, you're not going to find that. I would say that you need to look for something like the New Revised Standard Updated Edition. Let's just real quick. I hope that helps. Also, I've got a book coming out, How to Not Suck as a Christian, and that's one of the chapters in it. Why the Bible is not anti-homosexuality. We can talk more about that if you're interested. Here, just ask me the questions, and I will talk about it. Okay. For sure. Okay, Spencer, thank you for answering my question. I really admire you and glad I've been following your content. Hey, thank you so much, Spencer. I really appreciate it when people are kind and make those kind comments because I am dedicating my life and starting in January full time to this work and trying to help people find spiritual beliefs that work for them. By that I mean spiritual beliefs that help you be the best version of yourself, spiritual beliefs that help you find a purpose greater than yourself. That's what I do. So thanks for the compliment. Pearl Gray, would you mind sharing some thoughts on the purpose of prayer? Sure. And prayer is an interesting subject because really every religion has some way that people engage in something like this. Some of it's more meditative. And so I think when you look at Judaism and Christianity, prayer is something that is a way that you engage with God. You experience the divine. Unfortunately, in evangelical Christianity, it's come down to like making God a genie in a bottle, just asking God for stuff. And people will be like, well, what if God doesn't answer your prayer? And people say, God will answer your prayer, yes, no, or maybe. Well, that's this idea of prayer that's not in the Bible, right? That prayer is about asking God for stuff to do stuff for you. That's not it. It's prayer is really as far as the Christianity historically, Judaism is about engaging and experiencing God, and that can happen with words, can happen without words. There's all sorts of mystical streams of Christianity, wonderful practices like centering prayer that have less words. You're not saying anything to God. So, there you go, Pearl. So Blue Fox, let's see. Even NASA admits Jesus was crucified in AD 33. I have not seen anything about NASA, and I don't know why they would say that, but I mean, great. Way to go. I'm glad that I really would love a link there. That I confused as to why NASA would try to weigh in on religious historical figure, but sure. What do you think about non-canonical Gnostic Bible books? I think they're fascinating. Gnosticism is a stream of philosophy and that sort of separates the soul and values the soul over the body. The body is sort of like a prison for the soul. And so Gnosticism in Christianity, there was lots of that going on at one period. They're interesting. I don't treat them in the same way as I treat the Bible because the Bible had a long vetting period for almost 1,500 years before the canon was sealed in Roman Catholicism, a little bit earlier in some of the Orthodox traditions. But yeah, I think it's great. If you're looking for a wonderful book about that, it's called The Complete Gospels. It's got all of the stories of Jesus that have been discovered by archaeologists. It's a lot of fun to read. You can find them all in one book, and it's really great. Mic check, please, Doug. I don't know. Oh, wait, let's just see. We're going to try. Hopefully that's there. Let me tab over to my, to see how it's looking on Ecamm. Okay, yeah, it's coming through there. You might have a problem on your end. I'm not sure. Okay, so let's see. Let's see. Meat Man 77 Man, have you heard of the ESV? I have heard of the ESV. The ESV is problematic. The ESV was created out of an agenda. There was a revision of I think that was the New International Version that was changing things to be more accurate, and the ESV was a group of people that said, no, we want our conservative values reflected in the Bible, and we want to translate it through that lens. And so they did the ESV translation with a very strong agenda. So yeah, I'm not a fan of it. What is your belief, sir? Greg Brown. I don't know what you're asking. Maybe use some more words and we'll get back to it. Really appreciate you taking the time to field our questions. Pearl, I value your content. Thank you so much, Pearl. I really appreciate it. It really helps getting positive reinforcement like that, because I'm dedicating my life to this work. January 1st, I'm full time here and on our Not Church Discord server, which is like church. It said, one of our users said, it's like all the things you want from church. We're studying ancient texts together. We're processing our religious trauma. We're there for each other, like prayer requests, holding space for each other, all kinds of different people, some agnostic people. It's like all the things you want from a church, except nobody's telling you you're going to hell because you are believing the wrong things. And if you like my content, I'm in there almost every day, and it's a lot of fun. To get into it, you go to Patreon. So you go to patreon.com/skepticpastor, patreon.com/skepticpastor. It's $3 a month. We charge for it because I'm not going to ask you to give 10% of your income to me, because actually that's not really in the Bible. That's a chapter in my book, How to Not Suck as a Christian, that's coming out. But $3 gets you in there, and it's a Discord server. It's a lot of fun, and you pay for what you get. If it doesn't work for you, just stop paying. And there you go. Blue Fox, I am looking for the NASA site. Oh, please do. Would you DM that to me? That would be really fun. I'd love to read that. I heard a theory, Erica Reyes, I heard a theory that a lot of the Gnostic mindset is returning in the form of modern spiritualism. Sometimes, yeah, like I said, it's philosophic. It's a school of philosophy, and Wikipedia, actually the article on Gnosticism is fantastic, so you can go there, get a little overview of it, and you can decide for yourself whether or not it's coming back. Was Jesus' message that God was in us? The kingdom of heaven is within you. That's a passage in a verse in the book of John that is very much a Gnostic understanding. And hang on, sorry. Are you my dad's fist because you hit different? All right, Silhouette the Poet, thank you. Love that little imagery. That's really funny. I like the New American Standard and the Amplified. That's great. The New American Standard has some of the same problems as the King James. It's an old translation, so we've got a lot newer stuff available. The Amplified is great. Again, old translation, but I love the Amplified as well sometimes, because it gives all different definitions for words, and it's a lot of fun. It's actually in my rotation of, if I'm looking at a verse in a lot of translations, Amplified's always one that I go to. Erica Reyes, love your stuff too. Thank you. Gina Moore, Jesus is real. I love him so. Not sure what we were talking about. I'm so glad that you love Jesus, Gina. That is really wonderful, and I'm really glad that you found something that works for you and you find life in. That's so important. MT versus LLX. So that's Masoretic text versus the Septuagint. Not real. All of it. All of the text is what you need. Masoretic, the Septuagint, all of it. Scholars use all of it, and way more than that. How was my Sabbath? My Sabbath is not today. And Sabbath is a really interesting idea. Corey Smith, what book have you read recently that I really love? Yes, I will tell you. It is called The Awakened Brain by Lisa Miller. It is brilliant. Another book that I recently read, and I did a interview with the author. It's this one called Devout Anna by Anna Gazmarian. Oh, it's so good. It's a memoir of doubt. And you can go to my podcast, the Unbelief Podcast. The interview with her is on there. It's about doubt, deconstruction, her own mental health journey as a person with bipolar type 2 disorder. It's just wonderful. You should definitely get it off of Amazon. Let's see. This is Spirito. Biggest misconception is reading the difference between angelic versus angel. I'm not really sure about what you're talking about there. I'm not familiar with that specific translation difference. The Torah is the best translation. The Torah is not a translation. The Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible, and there are multiple translations of it. So, Thomas Bird, I think you've just got a little bit of a misunderstanding on the word Torah. Torah refers to the first 5 books of the Bible. NIV versus NRSVUE. Okay, perfect. NRSVUE, the New Revised Standard Updated Edition, is what academics say is the most accurate translation, and it's just scholars agree, right, with that. That's it. The NIV is problematic because the NIV is very dogmatic in the way that it approaches the text. It actually makes changes to the text in order to underscore evangelical ideologies and to imply that the Bible is univocal, that there is one voice that it speaks in from beginning to end. Perfect example, Genesis chapter 2, verse 19. So in Genesis chapter 2, we're in the second creation story. The first creation story, the animals are created first, humans are created second. In the second creation story, humans are created, then animals are created. But because the NIV is trying to make the Bible agree with itself, it actually changes the way it translates the word. It changes the tense of the verb. Instead of to say, and then the animals were created, but it says, and the animals had been created. God had created to make it agree with the order in the first chapter. There's a lot of stuff like that in the NIV, so it's not great. NRSVUE is what you want. If you want something that's a little easier to read, I also recommend the CEB, the Common English Bible. I think it's great. So I would recommend that. That's Shannon. That's the answer to your question. Corey Smith, you are welcome. Thank you. Love your content. I really appreciate it. I think he just recommended the NRSV. Yes, I did. Jesus Loves Me. Thank you. I agree. Thank you. I appreciate you and your content. Thank you. Very hard to deconstruct constructively. And this is Christina 511 something. Christina, yes. Also, part of deconstruction really needs to be that people are coming to a realization that the problem that existed prior to your deconstruction was that for most people, you inherited your beliefs. Somebody told you what to believe. And now you're forming your beliefs yourself. You're choosing your beliefs often based on data, asking questions. And that process, it's a never-ending process. You're basically entering into the rest of your life. And you've got a backlog of things you've got to figure out. But hopefully you're going to keep asking, you're going to keep questioning for a long, long time. And I'm here to help with that. That's actually what some of the things we do together in our Discord group called Not Church. We process all kinds of stuff, and it's full of people, all kinds of beliefs. People who call themselves Christians, people who don't. People call themselves post-Christian, which I think is a fascinating term, agnostics. We process our beliefs, our questions. People ask me questions there. I give long, mini paragraphs of response to their questions. It's called Not Church because somebody said it's like church, all the things you want from a church. Exploring spiritual beliefs, and nobody's telling you you're going to hell because you're not believing the right thing. If you want to be part of that, you can go to patreon.com/skepticpastor, patreon.com/skepticpastor. $3 a month, you get in, and if it doesn't work for you, just stop paying. Yeah. What I think is the real meaning behind Adam and Eve, rib, and forbidden fruit story. The rib, I love that imagery. So Adam and Eve, there's this imagery that Eve is created from Adam's rib, and that's a clear metaphor, and it's telling you something about the relationship between men and women, males and females, and it's pushing back against patriarchal ideals of that culture. So if Eve had been created from a footbone of Adam, it would be as if Adam was made to lord over her, to stand over her. If she was made out of something from his head, same thing, but the other way around, out of the rib, it means it's implying partnership. It's applying equality, walking through life side by side. So, yeah. What do you think? Nope, that was the one that Alex, hi. I just lost you. Is Geneva a good one? No. Geneva Bible's not. It's got similar problems with the King James. It's just based on outdated texts. King James loved his male companions more than women. I am not. I know that there's a lot of stuff tossed around about King James not being straight, and I haven't done the research on that to actually know. But man, if he wasn't, fine. Who cares, right? Read the Book of Mormon. I have read passages from it, but I'm not a Mormon, and so that's not the sacred text that I have been trained in. But I love talking to people who are trained in other religions. Thank you. I'm in traffic and so glad I found you. Shannon Kirch, I'm so glad that you did too. This is great. And also, I'm in traffic. I'm in the car with you. Hey, chill. Take a breath. It's going to be okay. It's just stay in the one lane. Don't go lane to lane. Just be zen. Let go on the need to beat the traffic. I'm reading the Oxford Bible. I'm guessing the New Oxford Annotated Bible. I've actually got one. Hang on. So the New Oxford Annotated Bible is a great Bible, and they're about to. This is from the New Revised Standard Version, of the 5th edition. They're actually about to come out with another New Oxford Annotated Bible that is going to have the NRSV UE translation in it as well. So you might want to update when that comes out. I'm actually going to make a video about it when it does. You guys just ignore any difficult questions. Hub, I'm trying not to ignore it. King James loved, I'm trying not to ignore it. I just don't know. Lalo, I'm sorry. I hate that. I'm trying not to ignore your questions. I'm also, lots of questions are coming in, and so sometimes it scrolls weird. There's a reason why parable, proverbs, allegory, shadows, the book is spiritual and not. I'm not sure what you were talking about, Deaf Phoenix. Let's see. Thanks, Jeremy. You seem like a real one. Doing my best. I also deconstructed evangelical. Okay, I appreciate your interpretation perspective. Yeah, thank you, Amanda. I hope that's Amanda Panda. Yes, it is. That's great. Okay, not a fan of Paul and his writings. Is it the translation message or is it me? A lot of people have problems with Paul. You got to understand, the Bible is written to a specific people at a specific time in a specific culture. Paul was a member of that culture. It was very patriarchal. And yet at the same time, Paul pushes back against that. He says there's no slave nor free, male nor female. He talks about women in leadership and greets them and affirms them. It's complicated, but I get it. A lot of people aren't a fan of Paul. Your take in speaking in tongues. Okay, so I'm assuming. Oh wait, I just lost I lost my place. But speaking in tongues, there are practices that are practices that are like that, these ecstatic experiences in multiple religions and multiple religious traditions. And I think that when you look at the biblical text, there's not a great case to be made that it's talking about that, especially in Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2 is really clear that people are specific languages. There's this one thing that's talking about the heavenly language. But I don't have a problem. If you want to speak in tongues, do it, man. If that's where you find life, go for it. A lot of people are going to think it's really weird if you're doing it in front of them, but it's fine. Finally, someone you can relate to after being church hurt and moving on. The veil has been lifted. Nina, wow. Nina, the beauty maker, I don't even know what to say. Thank you so much. You are so kind. And yeah, you would actually love our Discord group called Not Church. Everybody there is like this. We're all asking questions. We're holding space for each other. Nobody's telling somebody they're going to hell because they believe something different. If you want to be part of it, we'd love to have you. Patreon.com/skepticpastor, $3 a month. Patreon.com/skepticpastor. Biggest reason KJV is no good. Yeah, biggest reason the King James Version is no good is because it's based on outdated manuscripts. And so like when it was the best they had at the time. But since the King James Version was translated, we have discovered many more ancient manuscripts that are a lot older, and you can do stuff with that helps you find stuff that is actually even just passages that are in the King James Version that shouldn't be there. Easiest one to find is the book of Mark. At the end of the book of Mark, the part about the holding snakes and drinking poison, if you find modern translations, they're all going to have it grayed out, asterisk, bracketed, some note that says this is not in the most ancient translations. There's verses that are just deleted. You'll find in some books that it goes like John verse like 20, 21, 22, 24, and it's deleted because it's not in any ancient manuscripts. And so that's one of the main reasons it's no good. And then it's just using a version of English that nobody ever spoke. When it came out, people said we couldn't understand it, like the original people. That's why it had a hard time catching on. But yeah, there's a couple of them. And yeah, the words in English mean something different now than they meant then. Why is the worst translation? I love NASB. NASB is fine, still problematic. There's some agenda issues in the NASB. It's also not based on the most recent texts. So yeah. And here we go. Yes. Okay. So I'm trying to get down to the newer questions. Man, they're coming in so fast. Have you read the Geneva and Ethiopian Bible? So Ethiopian Bible, it's actually not a translation. It's a collection. It's got 88 books. I actually did a video explaining why the Ethiopian Bible has so many books. And you can go to, it might be easier to go to my YouTube channel, and Skeptic Pastor everywhere. And it's easier to search there. You can find a little bit about that if you're interested. And Dead Sea Scrolls are a collection of ancient manuscripts that were found. They're not the oldest, not all the oldest. We've got older and younger in there. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to do one more question, but before I do that, I just want to say, the goal when you read the Bible is to take it seriously, not literally, like this. Let's see if we can get it. Yes. It's a t-shirt. Take the Bible seriously, not literally. We have some merch, and it's a lot of fun. This merch store, even if you don't buy anything, you should go to numaCommunity.com KJV.com/store because we have the best descriptions of products. So that's a t-shirt. Take the Bible seriously, not literally. The description there says, perfect for those Sunday mornings when your pastor takes a deep dive into the literal meaning of Revelation. Wear this shirt to remind everyone that the Bible is not an IKEA instruction manual. It's a complex, nuanced, ancient text. Bonus points if you sit in the front row. So it's great. NewmanCommunity.com/store. We've got that. Take the Bible seriously, not literally. We've got, I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. You should definitely buy some of that for your pastor for a Christmas present. Buttons, mugs, stickers, you know how it goes. But just go there and read the descriptions. The product descriptions are worth a visit either way. All right, one more question. So let's see. Okay. What's the best Bible? Here we go. Best translation of the Bible is academic consensus. The academics agree. New Revised Standard, updated edition. So this is it. This is one version of it. If you see here, it says SBL. SBL is the Society of Biblical Literature. They are the collection of academics that, if you have a PhD in biblical languages, you're a member of the Society of Biblical Literature. It's a membership organization, and they say that the New Revised Standard Updated Edition is the translation of the Bible you want. I like this study Bible because this is the people, all that collection of biblical scholars that are alive today. They put this together, and it's really, really great. Also, one of the people is the lovely Dan McClellan that many of us here on TikTok love. He's one of the people who worked on that project. If you're looking for it, sometimes that version, though, can be a little difficult to read. So I also, a great modern translation is the CEB, the Common English Bible. I think that's fantastic. All right, that's it. We have been going for an hour and a half, and we will do this again. Thank you so much for this. And if you want to be part of this, this basically a church, this on Discord for people who are doubters and skeptics and all kinds of religious agnostics, people who identify as all kinds of things, go to go to patreon.com/skepticpastor. And it's $3 a month. You can get into this Discord. It's great. If you want to see some really fun merch, Nooma Community, NOOMA community.com/store. The descriptions there are hilarious. And I thank you so much. We'll see you again later.